Hello, today I want to tell you about a time when I was a junior developer where I really screwed up and lost a couple weeks worth of work, and it was all totally avoidable. I also want to share with you the solution so that I've never run into that problem again, and some really cool tips and tricks around it. So let's get started. This happened many years ago. I think it was in the early 2000s. I don't know exactly when, but I was working on a tool for the EverQuest 2 team. I was working with my buddy Salim. You've probably seen him on the channel before. And I had made a nice tool for them to build some new items and basically batch generate large amounts of items for the game. So you could do an entire set of items, have them all be on theme, and get all of the kind of the base stats right from the default, and then be able to go in and modify them to basically minimize a lot of the grunt work. And while I was working on that project, normally I would check things into Perforce and every time I did an update, and then send it over to Salim or whoever was working on it. Usually it was Salim though. So I'd send him over the tool and everything would go fine, give him new updates probably 3 to 4 times a day, sometimes even more than that. But then there was, for some reason, and I don't have a good excuse for it or a good reason, for some reason about 2 weeks of time went by where I did zero committing to source control. I don't remember what it was. I don't know if I just ran into an issue, if I just got lazy, or if I just didn't think that it was important enough. I think it was probably a combination of all three of those. So I stopped committing things into source control and kept working on stuff. It worked fine for about 2 weeks until one day, all of a sudden, the project no longer worked on my system. In fact, it wasn't all of the project. It was just the main code file where I had most of the code in. And back in that day, I was a junior developer, so I had like one big file with a lot of stuff in it, and my code was not very separated or clean. So it was a big mess, and that file got corrupted. It got lost, and somehow I ended up with a very old version of it and lost basically 2 weeks worth of work. And I had no way to get it back. I didn't have another copy of that file anywhere or anything else. And I ended up having to decompile the stupid script. I had to decompile it out of my executable using I forget which decompiler, get back the code. It was one of the ones that was available back then, but it got the code that was in this decompiled form. So all the variables are named like A1 and B2 and ridiculous stuff. All of the methods have terrible names, at least most of them did. And I had to go back through and try to fix that thing. And as you can imagine, it was a giant nightmare. It ended up taking me a long time to just get back to being productive. I think it took me like another 2 weeks to fix and figure out all of the stuff that I had done and changed over the 2 weeks and lost my changes for. So I really hated it, and I definitely learned a strong lesson there that committing things into source control is very important. Committing them regularly is important, and there's a lot of benefit to it. Now, if you haven't used source control yet, hang on for just a second, because I want to show you the Unity source control system and show you really quickly how you use it and how you can do some really cool stuff with it too. So the Unity source control system, or the one that is now ships with Unity and has been purchased by Unity, is the Plastic SCM. Now, this replaces the built-in Collaborate system that used to be the default, and you can get to it by going to Window and Plastic SCM. In fact, you can see in this version of Unity, I've actually got both of them. The newer one, Collaborate's completely gone, and just Plastic is there. You get a little pop-up like this when you first run it in a project. It'll tell you to log in and sign up for a Plastic account. I've already done that. I don't want to run through it. I do go through all of that in my detailed course. If you're interested in that, you can check it out down below. But once you're set up, you can just create a Plastic workspace by hitting the Create Workspace. You give it a name, and then one thing that I've noticed that's important is sometimes you need to click this drop down and make sure that this server is not set to local. Something I've reported to them. I think that it's fixed in newer versions, but it's something that happens often for me. So you got to go select your correct account that you've created and hit OK, and then you give it a workspace name. And usually what I would recommend is going with that default option that you need branching, merging, and the ability to push and pull. It's going to give you some extra capabilities that I'm going to show you in just a moment. Then you hit the Create Workspace button. What it's going to do is create a remote repository where you can save off all of your work, and if something goes wrong, you can just grab it again. And you can also grab it from multiple systems. So here you see that it's created my repository, and it now has added in private here as a list or as a section that I can expand with all of the files that are in my project. Right now it's all of the files from the publisher sale free demo pack that was available. I just did a video about that. You can probably check that out. If you're subscribed, I'm sure you already saw it, but it's a free thing that they're doing once a week. So I've got all of the assets selected by hitting that checkbox. I can uncheck specific assets, say if I wanted to not check in a specific piece of art or maybe some change that I had done, but I'm going to start with checking everything. And then what we want to do is write a commit message. And a commit message is a message that's going to show up for myself and everybody else in the future to know what was in this actual commit or what I've changed at this point in time. So for the change message, I'm going to say that we've added the medieval village demo or asset. That's what we want. Added the medieval village asset. I'm going to spell medieval right. I spell that word wrong every single time. If you spell it wrong too, let me know in the comments. I'm curious. That's one of the hardest words for me. Let's hit check-in changes. I know it's a stupidly easy word, but I spell it wrong every single time. There it goes. It's uploading all 300 megs. And when it finishes, we should see a change in our change sets. So now if I go to the change sets tab, you'll see that we have change set with a creation date of just now, a comment for with the message that I put in there, my name and email address, and then the commit number right there. So let's see what happens if I make a change to this game. Let's say I go in and I've now created a new script for my player. I'll go create a new C# script and we'll call this player. If I go back into my Plastic SCM window, notice that little plus right there showing up on the player. It's giving me an indication that something's happened. That's in the project view. But if I go to the Plastic SCM window and go to pending changes, you'll see that I now have this player.cs file. I can see that it's in my scenes folder, which is the wrong place, but I'm going to commit it anyway because I want to show you how to move things next. So let's say that we've added a player script, added the player script. And now normally I would probably write a little bit of code in that player script before I committed it. I'm not going to commit an empty script, but let's imagine that I've written a little bit of code and I check in my changes. Now when I go back to my change set list, I'm going to see two changes. I've got my medieval village asset and the one where I added the player script. Now I can go move that player script. Let's go to the project folder, or the project window, and I'm going to take my player script, move it out into the assets root folder, and then let's go create a new folder off of there called scripts. And then we'll move that player into there and then see what it does. So I've got my scripts folder, and I'll take my player and drag it into the scripts folder. Now I'm going to go back into Plastic SCM and see what's changed. I should see that I've got a moved item saying that it moved my player.cs. You can see it's got a status of moved and a link to it, and then an added new folder. So here I'll say that we added a scripts folder and moved the player script to it. And we'll check in our changes again. Now let's go back to that change set list. Here you can see I've got all three of my changes, the three things that I've done, and I can do different stuff with this now. I can look at it, which is kind of neat, but say I want to, well, actually, let's make one change to our script first. Let's go into our scripts and make this make even more sense. We'll go to our player script, open it up, and we'll write a little bit of code in here. Let's just drag it over. And here in our update, let's just read the input, move the player, and call it good. So we'll say if input.get, or no, let's read into a variable. Say var horizontal equals input.get axis, and we'll get the horizontal axis. And then we'll duplicate that line with Control D, make a vertical, vertical, and we'll do a vertical. And then we'll just move the character. So we'll say transform.translate. And we'll move in a new vector 3, which will be our horizontal on the X, 0 on the Y, and our vertical on the Z. Let that auto-complete. And now I've got an amazing player script that lets me move around left and right with no speed controls or anything else and completely fly around because my frame rate is going to be nuts. So I'll go like a meter per frame or whatever. Not the best script, but I do have changes in Plastic SCM now, and that's what I wanted to show you. So if we look at our player script here, I can see that I've got changes in it, but let's say I've been working on this for a while. Maybe I made those changes last night, and I don't really remember what it was, what I did there. Maybe I forgot if I completely finished it or exactly what I had done in there. What I can do now is right-click on this player script and hit the diff button. And that's going to pop up my source control diff tool, which by default is this one that comes with Plastic. And you can see that it shows the script on the left and on the right. This is the player script, both versions of it. The existing one that's already committed to source control that has nothing in the update, and the new one that has these new changes in the update. This lets me see what I've done to the script in between changes or in between commits, and it lets me compare different versions of files later. So this looks good. I'm going to say that that was a good change, and just hit the X button and then commit our change so that we added movement to the player script. And we'll check that in. And then let's go back to that change set one more time. Let's say that maybe I'm going through here and I really don't like that player script. I'm like, oh, this player script is terrible. I don't like this version of it. I want to go back and undo that. Or maybe it was something worse. Maybe I pulled in a 3 gig art asset pack that I don't necessarily want to have in here. I want to remove it. What I can do is right click on one of these change sets. Let's say I go back to this first change set here, number 2, right click and hit revert to change set. That's going to revert my entire project, watch this, over to the original version. So now if I go to the assets folder, I no longer have a scripts folder. And if I go to Plastic SCM, my scripts folder is actually deleted. If I check this in, I'm going to be removing my source or my code that I'd written and completely deleting it out of source control. Let's do that. So deleted the player script. Didn't like it. And we'll check that in. Let's go look at what our change set looks like now. So now you'll see that we've got version 2 where we had our initial setup. We have the version 3 where we added the player script. Version 4 where we moved the player script into the correct thing. Version 5 where we wrote the code. And then version 6 where we go, oh yeah, we don't like that. So we deleted that script completely. Now, let's say that I wanted to experiment a little bit more. Maybe I want to build something in my game, but I'm not sure that it's something that I want to keep in it. Maybe that player script was something that I was thinking. Or maybe it's like an enemy script. One thing I can do is go to the branches option. And in the branches section, I can actually create a new branch, but I can't do it from, well, let's see. If I hit the button here, get branches, branch explorer. There we go. This will pop up the Plastic SCM branch explorer, but it still doesn't actually let me create new branches. So if I want to create a brand new branch, the only way that I know to do it, I mean, just double check that I'm not crazy, is to open up the Plastic SCM tool. So if you open up the Plastic SCM tool that you download directly from their page, then what you can do is find your project. So let's go find our correct project. This is the open. I'll hit open other workspace and find my project, which is the city one right here. And then inside of the Plastic SCM tool, you've got a lot of the same controls that you have inside of Unity, but you have a couple extra things. You can go to the branches and kind of view and expand them. But what we want to do is go into the part where we do our changes, pending changes right here. And let's go add something. So right now you see that there's nothing in our change list. There's nothing pending. If I go down here, back into our project, and let's just say that I've created a new prefab out of, let's make one of these barrels into a new prefab. I'll take this barrel, take it right into the root, and then create let's make a prefab variant of that barrel. We'll go adjust this prefab variant just a tiny bit, maybe go, do something stupid like tint it some weird ugly color or something. Like, there we go. We'll go make it into a red tinted barrel. And then go back into, if I go to my Plastic SCM window here, you should see my changes. But what we want to do now is go to the other Plastic window and see our changes in here. Now you see that we've got the same data. We've got our prefab here, but you also can see that the meta file is getting checked out too. That's the data file that's associated with every Unity file. Unity just kind of hides those because it doesn't necessarily need to show you double the number of files in there. So we've got our changes here. We've added this barrel, and I want this to go into a new branch because it's something that I'm not sure that I want everybody else to use, and I'm not sure that I'm going to even merge back in to my final one. So I could call this well, first of all, let's put in a check-in message, say added a red barrel, and then go to the check-in section. And there's a drop down here. What we can do is hit check-in changes to a different branch. So I can hit that button and then name this branch like red barrel. Now, normally this would be something more like a enemy system or a flying mount system or some other bigger feature than just an extra item. But I want to start simple. We'll just do a barrel for now. We've added a barrel in. And now if I go back over to my Unity view and look at my change sets, you'll see that we've got this red barrel here. But I also now have stuff available on my branches tab. And if you hit the refresh button, it should show up if you don't see it already. You'll have a main branch and then now I've got my red barrel branch because that's what I named my branch. Now I'm going to make another change. Let's just go duplicate this barrel, save our scene so that we have some changes, and go to the pending changes. And here I've got my saved scene. Oh, and I updated a package in between there. So I've got a packages update as well. Let's go check these in. So we modified the main scene and check in our changes. And then let's go back into the Plastic SCM tool, go to the Branch Explorer, and here you'll see where we've split. So we've got our main branch where we did our first 5 commits, and then we split down to this red barrel branch where we can make some changes. But let's say I'm not ready to keep working on my red barrel. I want to go back to my other version and start working on that some more. What I can do is go back to branches, right click on this main branch, and then hit switch workspace to this branch. What that'll do is switch your current workspace, which is your current project folder, over to be on that main branch. So if I hit that button, you'll see that as soon as I do, my level is going to change. Let's see, it's going to reload. And once it's done, you see that the red is gone. And if I go to my project view, that extra prefab that we'd created isn't here either. But I haven't lost those changes. Those changes are still available. They're just inside of a branch. Now I can keep working on this main branch and say that I maybe changed the skybox clear color to something like a light blue. Let's save our scene, go to Plastic SCM, changed skybox color to light blue, which I don't even think is applying because I'm using a skybox. But let's say I changed that clear flag, not really the skybox color. But I mostly just want to show you this so that when we go back into Plastic SCM and go back and just refresh and choose the Branch Explorer and hit F5, you'll see that now I've got my main branch that I'm back in where I've got my changes. I'm actually ahead of this red barrel branch where I changed some things previously. And that spacing is based on the time or the number where they were submitted, basically based on the time. But I can always go back to this red barrel branch if I want. I can right click on it and hit switch workspace to this change set, or I can do something called merging and bring these changes in. This is something that we'll do in a bigger project or when we're working on things for a longer time. We'll start to branch off and merge in and make new things. Either way, though, even if you don't go into the branching and the merging, just using source control, being able to diff, having versions of your stuff everywhere, and being able to grab it on your laptop or your other system is more than worthwhile. It's also totally built in and it's free to start using. So I would recommend that you start using some source control system, either Plastic or Git or one of the alternatives. Those are kind of the 2 primary ones. So although in AAA places, a lot of the time we use Perforce as well. So I'd try using some source control, put it into your projects. Don't forget to check stuff in like I did for multiple weeks and end up with a nightmare. And if this was helpful at all, you like these longer videos on this kind of stuff, please hit the thumbs up button, subscribe and share. It makes a big difference and makes me do more of them. All right, thanks again. See you in the next one. Oh, also, don't forget to check out the GameDev Bootcamp opening up very soon. I'll put a link down below. It's a good way to learn about source control and a whole bunch of other game dev stuff. If you're interested in learning and want to learn a whole lot really quick, it's probably the best option. At least I think it's the best option, but that's because I made it. All right, see you later. Bye.